Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scott McKay.
How's it going, gentlemen? Welcome again to yet another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. My name is Scott McKay, at Scott McKay on Twitter and Parler, Real Scott McKay on Instagram. YouTube is Scott McKay. You can join us on the web at mountaintoppodcast.com. And once again, like I do every show, I invite you to join us on the Facebook group for Men of Character, which is the Mountaintop Summit on Facebook. If you guys have not yet joined us, it's time. After you're done listening today, go ahead and sign up. I will approve you, and you will be a part of our insider group of Mountaintop Summit members. Now, with me today is a new friend of mine. He's a great guy. His name is Larry Indiviglia, and he is not only the head honcho over at Insights for Life. See what he did there? He is a graduate of the United States Naval Academy. And he has a tremendous story to tell, which we're going to get to in a little bit. But after some deliberation before we hit record on this particular podcast, Larry and I decided mutually that he is the guy. He is the freaking man, actually, to help me cover a topic that has been rattling around in my cranium for months and months now. And I've been searching for the right guest to address it with. It's a fantastic topic, and I've never heard anyone else ever hit it with a big, heavy hammer the way we're going to. That topic is dying well as a man. So with that, I want to welcome my new friend and my co-host today, Larry Indiviglia. Larry, welcome, man.
Scott, a pleasure to be here. Thanks for all the great work you're doing with Mountaintop, and I am just ready to go and looking forward to having a great discussion and connecting today, man.
Yeah, man. Well, that's what I love to hear, obviously, as a host. And back at you, man, because the work you're doing is also very important and very inspiring, I might add. So let's dive right into this, man. I think the first thing we owe these guys is what the heck exactly we're going to be talking about today. And I'll go ahead and tee that up for you. When you see movies like The Shootist with John Wayne, which these guys may have seen, may not have, or a similar movie like Gran Torino, with Clint Eastwood, of course. You have two very tough, iconic, masculine leading men in those movies. Both of those movies were at least advertised as the last movie the respective actor was ever going to do. In John Wayne's case, that was absolutely true. And yet they have a very similar plot. And the plot is, here's a guy who's dying in an ignoble way. You know, he's going to cough himself to death. He's going to die of a disease. He's just going to waste away. Another movie off the top of my head that comes up, of course, is Tombstone, right? Which is iconic with men because Val Kilmer's rendition of Doc Holliday is so riveting for this exact same reason. I mean, here's a guy coughing up blood, looking very pale. He's on death's door, dying of tuberculosis in the movie. And yet, he still goes out and wants to be a hero and defend honor and the American way and all that stuff. Yeah. In real life, he did end up on a deathbed and pass away of the tuberculosis, but, not without a fight, right?
Absolutely.
What it comes down to is an iconic sense we have as men that we don't want to just waste away. We want to go out with a bang instead of a whimper, right? And that means dying in a blaze of glory rather than just simply passing away by letting something beat you. You're going to stand up to whatever this is rather than just not making a stand at all. And I would argue that this iconic sense is right up there with other iconic storylines, like, for example, the hero's journey, which we've talked about a lot on this show, in that it's something we as men find fascinating and that we resonate with and that we gravitate towards. Not that any of us want to die, especially die young, but that we just want to matter all the way to the very end. You know what I mean?
Yes, Scott, you hit on a couple of great things in that we all do want to be heroes in our life and feel fulfilled and feel great about not only what we've done, but how we leave. Our legacy, whatever that happens to be, it just turns out to be you when you leave, not how much money you had or anything else. And it just comes down to your DNA. What can you do when you're on that last stage of life? How are you going to dance? What are you going to do? What are you willing to do? And in many cases, who do you relate to? Who do you come in contact with that may or may not help you do that? And very rarely do we do that alone. We get a chance to do that alone. And I had a chance to do it, to actually help somebody and watch somebody doing the John Wayne, doing the Val Kilmer, and it was a she.
Yes.
And it was warrior-like. And it was something that I got captivated by right away, and I wasn't afraid of it. And I saw that I was going to play a role in this in a very special and powerful way, and being able to lead as a man to a woman who was going to die like a hero because she could, and she chose to, and she wanted to. Very powerful.
Now, the name of your book, which I'll link guys to later, of course, is actually 126 Days, 11 Minutes, Our Love Story. And in the interest of full disclosure with these guys, you and I had originally discussed as a topic the idea made famous by Alfred Lord Tennyson, which is it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all.
Correct.
And in shooting the breeze before the show, we kind of realized, we can kind of say that, we can talk about it for a couple minutes, and then we'd kind of be left hanging because people are either going to believe that or not. I'm not going to take any risk at loving someone because I might lose them, abandonment fears or whatever may take hold, or they're going to hurt me, they're going to leave me. So I just don't want to get hurt. Therefore, I'm going to avoid getting into a relationship. The old anxious avoidance, attachment style,
oh, yeah.
Right? And you basically looked that concept in the face, scoffed at it, and went headlong into a romantic relationship with a woman who basically had been told she was on a very short timeline due to the cancer that was already ravaging her body even when you met her, and you went for it anyway. So tell us a little bit more about what led you to go ahead and face that headlong, knowing what the inevitable was ultimately going to be.
Yeah, Scott, the woman who I met, her name was Gail. And in 126 days, 11 minutes, that was the time we had together, our love story, and it was a love story. We chose to live for the today, not in the yesterdays or the tomorrows, and to embrace each day. And to connect with somebody on that level, I was initially captivated by her courage, by her honesty, certainly by her looks, by her transparency. She was a professional photographer for 33 years. She related to people. She knew people. She was a mystic. There was a lot of things about Gail that was just awesome, but I liked her courage. She had battled it 4.5 years when I met her. And I just had this feeling I had to discover more about this woman because there was some kind of vortex, energy vortex with her that I just knew, Scott, was special. I didn't know how long she was going to live. I didn't care. I knew I was playing a role there. And Gail let me lead. She let me lead in this relationship. She had a great sense of humor. She was comfortable in saying, I'm okay with that. Let's do it. And there was not too many limitations. And early on, she said, I'm a woman. Okay. I'm not an invalid. If I couldn't be a woman, Larry, I wouldn't be sitting here trying to meet a man. But I refuse to crawl up in a hole and to die in a cave somewhere and not live however long I have left. And that warrior-like spirit, yet there was a softness to her. So she was mystical, but yet she had a steely, hard resolve. And you might say it could be masculine-like in some ways, Scott. But man, I knew there was something special. I was captivated by it. from the start.
So in many ways, she was living the famous Tim McGraw song that's probably about 20 years old now, about living like you're dying. And so many people apparently live like they've got eternity to go. And really, all of us have an expiration date, of course. I mean, it's such a banal thing to say, but it's true, yet nobody seems to live like it. I mean, we smoke, we drink, we eat all the wrong things, we don't exercise, we pay no attention to our health. I mean, the thing that always makes me laugh is everybody talks about getting healthier and going on a diet and quitting drinking or whatever so they look better. You know?
Yeah.
It's like, screw that noise. I'm going to live 25 years longer. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And yet people don't live as if every day counts. Then all of a sudden one day, the doctor gives you the worst news you've ever heard in your entire life. You freak out and go, okay, I've got 6 months. I better, go Rocky Mountain climbing and go 6.7 seconds on a bull named Fu Manchu or whatever the number is in the Tim McGraw song. And I think that's why that song really resonated, And of course, Tim McGraw wrote that song partially in honor, at least, to his dad, Tug McGraw, the great baseball pitcher who had died of cancer. That's what inspired it. And yet you willingly stepped into Gail's life when she knew she was on a timeline. And you got to witness this firsthand of how she wanted to live like she was dying. And I sensed that it wasn't like you were living vicariously with her through that, even though you were going to live longer than she was, at least ostensibly. And of course you did. But it seemed like you were a passenger experiencing that along with her, in some part at least, because you're a man, she's a woman, and you're the leader, you're the provider, you're the protector, you're presiding over that situation, making her feel like a woman. Correct?
Yeah, Scott, very, very true. It's interesting. When we met online, her name was the Tender Lioness, and my name was the Lion. Maybe that was in some cases ironic or meant to be. So she was the Tender Lioness and I was the Lion. And Gail was also an Argentine tango dancer. So in that particular type of dance, Scott, the male leads very much so.
And that's part of the reason why it's so sensual.
Exactly. The male leads and the woman responds to his lead. If he's a lousy lead, he gets a lousy response. Okay? So normally in tango dancing, it takes about 4 or 5 years to get real good as a leader on the floor, to lead a woman and multiple women, because when you go to these things, you dance with a lot of them. But Gail, that was part of her life was for 12, 13 years. And tango dancing kept her alive because she was able to express herself. She was able to move. She was able to be sensual with a man. However, Argentine tango dancing is not enough. It's not a full love relationship as we know it between a man and a woman. And she was looking for that, and she found it online with myself. By choice or chance, to use her words, perhaps a little of both. But I think it was destiny that we met and connected. And man, it was powerful.
Well, you're talking about her being a lioness and you being a lion. And I'm sure guys are out there scratching their head going, good grief, dude, this woman was dying of cancer. She knew it. And she's on Tinder? And my answer, and I'm sure your answer too, is, well, hell yeah. I mean, she's going to need the right guy to walk that path with her. But that's why all these guys would be on Tinder or on Match.com. It's why I was on Match.com 15 years ago. I wanted a woman who was one of me, who was on my team, who was ready for this. And I'll tell you what, I applaud her sense of self, her wherewithal to get online and look for the guy to be her partner, because I don't think she was dragging you into something. I think she was giving you a gift that you'll cherish for the rest of your life. I mean, that's unbelievable self-esteem. That's a woman who's not only ready to die well, but a woman who understands her life is going to be worth it, worth every minute, perhaps especially because she's at the end of it. I'm reminded a little bit of what I talk about in my website for the Invincible program, which is all about boldness and confidence for men. The first thing I talk about at the top of the page is lions. It's the first thing I talk about. And what inspired me there, Larry, was I had the very great honor and privilege, and it is that, to go on safari in Africa after having seen lions in a zoo my entire life. And I don't know about you, but I'd rather see a crow in the wild than anything in the zoo. Okay. It's just more meaningful. And the first thing I noticed about lions in the wild is, first of all, they don't give a flying flip about you and your Land Rover. They just look at you like, what? You're not going to come closer to me. You wouldn't dare. And it's in the eyes. You see a lion in the wild, and it's not the lion at your zoo. And you realize there's a fire in that feline animal's eyes that just gets doused. It gets cold water thrown on it when that animal is in captivity. I mean, lions are plenty awesome in the zoo, but they don't have that fire in their eye anymore. And the analogy I draw is, I think a lot of us guys in this life are caged lions. We are lions. We're meant to be that wild, ferocious, dominant animal, the king of the freaking jungle. Of course, that's a misnomer, right? Because the Serengeti is anything but a jungle, but the king of the savannah. And we've just let the light, the fire in our eyes get extinguished. And it takes a man with that lion's fire, that wild fire of a wild lion in his eyes, to respond to a lioness the way you did. And she found her king.
Scott, it's great descriptor. When you get back into nature, Gail was a Virgo. She always, so she was close to nature. She was an earth maiden, but she loved nature. Nature was life to her. She loved, a lot of her photography was with naked women out in nature. Okay. So she had a great connection to nature. I happen to be a Leo, and of course the animal that's associated with the astrological sign Leo is a lion.
Right.
And you speak to eyes. Gail had these blue crystal eyes. You cannot not look at them when you looked at her. And that was a thing I'll always remember about her, is those crystal blue eyes. She did have these piercing eyes, and, part of her captivation. But the lion is the king of the jungle, and the lioness is protected by the king of the jungle. So there was some association there, perhaps. Maybe we get into the primal, animalistic ties and connections. There's something to it. Okay. And, perhaps that was part of what we had. That was part of what we had. And it was it was a natural thing. And, with Gail, Scott, it's interesting, to really be able to connect emotionally, physically, spiritually, and mentally on some level with a woman, not an easy thing to do. And, but when somebody is living an heroic life in the last stages, I will submit it is easier to do. I was able to connect with her on an emotional, mental, physical, and somewhat spiritual level, which is not achieved with a lot of women. A guy having the ability and the alignment with a woman on all four of those aspects of life and of your being, not easy to do. I had that with Gail, and I will submit that perhaps in her later stages of life and the type of person she was, it was the first time I really had ever done that with a woman, really connected on those four levels.
You're a lion. She's a lioness. And coming from that perspective, you think similarly already. And this is what I tell guys all the time, and we've talked about it on this show quite a lot. So I'm just saying this, to help this particular conversation along insofar as it'll do that. But a lot of guys to see a woman who's hot and go, oh, I want that. And they want it selfishly. And what a lot of men with that very simplistic attitude miss is the gift of connecting with a woman and tapping into all of those things that a woman can bring to your life other than just simply sex. I mean, a lot of guys are ready to tap into the sex, right?
Yep.
That's great. You and I, I'm sure, both love sex as much as the next stiff out there, right?
Most definitely.
No pun intended. But, but I hope we're still stiff at our age, but I'm not going to go there. All right. Hope is not a strategy, right?
Never.
Yeah. You're the Academy guy. You know that already. All right. So that femininity, that energy, that willingness to embrace a strong man's lead, the amount that makes you feel like a hero. It gives you a pathway to being a hero. It gives you receptivity to your heroism, providing, protecting, leading. And in response, a real woman who loves masculinity and embraces her own femininity, giving back. I mean, here's a woman who part of her dream for herself, part of her aspiration for herself at the end of her life is, I want to give away my femininity to a man who actually deserves it. And that was fulfilling to her. So as she gives you this feminine gift, one after the other, letting you lead the dance, what you're doing is offering each other an incredible experience of depth, of great value that, again, coming back full circle here, is something most people at the very least completely overlook when they think they have no expiration date in life, or at worst, just flat out take for granted. And you and Gail didn't have that luxury. So you're going full bore after life. And that's amazing to me. And it should be incredibly inspiring to guys listening. Now, to kind of further this discussion, because I feel like what I just said kind of stands alone.
All true, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. Gail died of cancer. And that is a painful, perhaps not proud way to die in the physical sense. And if you're dying of cancer or some other debilitating, even degenerative disease, I suspect what needs to be said next is that doesn't mean you're going to be prohibited from this idea of dying well. I mean, you don't have to get shot up in a hail of bullets as an otherwise ostensibly healthy guy in order to die heroically and die well. This is more about taking the hand that you're dealt, and yes, being a fighter, but also taking full advantage of that to the bitter end.
Yeah, absolutely, Scott. Your point is spot on. Cancer can be a painful death, stage 4 breast cancer, then metastasized to bones, to your lungs. Eventually, it spread to Gail's brain, and ultimately that's what she died of, is it went to the brain. There was nothing they could do about it. And you can stay in your truth and say, I'm not just going to be another number here. I want to find out the best place for me to die. I'm not going to be a number. I'm not going to get discharged from the hospital and just throw me somewhere, not have enough pain medication, especially with COVID. Who knows what the hospice situation could be. So she fought. She stuck to her guns, and I helped her to get her into an inpatient hospice where the pain meds and the pain was controlled so that she did not have to die in excruciating physical pain, even though her body was wasting away, so that she could then still reach out emotionally and mentally and find peace emotionally and mentally, which I helped her with. Each person who's dying, Scott, let's be clear, has to find their own peace. I can't give her peace, but we were able to spend connect time so that she went down that road where she could then decide, how long am I going to live here? How long am I going to fight? If I need to let go, I'll let go when I'm ready to let go. But I'm not going to die in 14 days because a couple of doctors told me I only had 14 days to go. And I'm for sure as hell not going to die in pain. So you have control over those things, but you must stay to your truth. You must be your own advocate. You must decide that I'll put myself in that situation, which eventually for Gail was in an inpatient hospice. And she died knowing that she gave her last. And she transitioned, I believe, when she was ready to transition, after she was able to concentrate, not to fight anymore, but now, how am I going to die? And am I going to find and discover some type of peace? If Larry's here with me and help me do that, awesome. But that's the situation I want to get in. And she did. And I'm happy to say she did. And it was heavy stuff, but it wasn't a downer. And you say, Larry, how could you say that? You're not the one dying. There was a bigger lesson going on. And our self-preservation, Scott, anytime you see somebody dying, you are glad it's not you. You admire it. You're just blown away by it, and you're inspired by it, and you learn something from it. But I got to tell you, you say, I'm glad it's not me. Or if I'm placed in this situation someday, can I do this like Gail's doing?
That is the very definition of dying well. It's admirable. In this podcast so far, we've kind of skirted around this idea of not dying alone and dying well with the help of other people. Mm. And now you're bringing up this idea of you're not in their position. You can't be, which means at the core, the world's most cynical concept of dying alone is actually in many ways very true. Anytime you die alone. It's your death uniquely. But I think you've perfectly encapsulated this idea of she wasn't lonely when she died. There was human connection. You know, you always hear the story about this person died peacefully with their entire family by their bedside. And, you know, that's always something that kind of makes us smile with a certain sense of peace ourselves. You know, at least this person went out loved and cared for. And that is a yearning of the human heart, is to be loved and cared for and appreciated and feel as if our life mattered. And that was the gift you gave to her at the end of her life. Another twist to this, I'm reminded of the movie Phenomenon, which in my opinion, you know, Pulp Fiction aside, okay, we're going to put Pulp Fiction in its own category, is probably John Travolta's best movie he's ever done. Mm-hmm. It may be a little bit obscure to some of these guys, and I bet you it makes you cry like a baby. As manly as you are, I'm sure you've seen it.
It does.
It's the story of John Travolta dying, and almost exactly the storyline matches up with yours, except the gender roles are reversed, of course. He meets the woman of his dreams right when he finds out he's about to die. And the most poignant and unforgettable and indeed chilling line is when John Travolta asks her, when they both know that he's about to die, he says, you know, kind of a little bit tongue-in-cheek, although he's certainly serious, to the female lead in the movie, which is played, of course, by the adorable Kira Sedgwick, right? He says, "Will you love me for the rest of my life?" And Kira Sedgwick's character, who was madly in love with John Travolta's character at this point, says, "I'm going to love you for the rest of my life." It's such a tearjerker, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that movie is a huge tearjerker. I mean, it's a great date movie. I mean, it'll make the woman just jump on you and hug you forever like she's a koala bear at the end of the movie, as sad as it is. You know, but that's probably gratuitous of me to say that about that movie, but God help me, I'm a dating coach. And to me, that kind of captures the essence of what you were saying you were feeling, which is very real. I mean, not many of us ever get the opportunity to share in the act of someone dying well, let alone experience it firsthand. But what a powerful way to contribute to it. And it seems to me that's the best human contribution someone can give to another human being so that they don't feel as if they died alone, right?
Yes, Scott, it's very true. You know, if you read books about people in their last stages of life, and there's many of them out there. I'm certainly not an expert at any. However, I pay attention to them on occasion. And it's like they still want to be connected to the world. They may be dying, whether it's cancer or other terminal illnesses. They still want to be connected to the world. As a person who's either caregiving or certainly if you're seeing that person every day, the importance of bringing in life to them, whether it's from nature, whether it's opening a window, whether they hear the birds singing, whether you bring in music, whether you bring in art, whether you bring in things that they loved and paid attention to, anything that could help them still connect with life. And I remember Gail one time, I don't want to listen to this music that sounds like I'm dying, like this pan flute music. Like, put on some jazz.
Exactly.
Put on some tango music, Larry. Come on. You know, and I did. So I made an effort, and I'm sure other people may do it too, Scott, to bring in things from her life that she really liked, really loved. With COVID, it was very tough at the end. She couldn't visit a lot of people. A lot of people could not come in and visit her other than myself and one or two immediate family members. So I took it upon myself to never be absent in that room, to always be present, to never be absent in that room when I was with her. And I had to be in that room. And it wasn't for my whole relationship with Gail. That was during her last stages. We had awesome times together, joy, happiness, adventure. It was great. But man, towards that end, I wanted to keep leading and bring in touches and connections to life to her, because she was not ready to go, certainly not right away. And that meant a lot to her. And I think it means a lot to people who are dying.
Such a powerful point. You brought up the pan flute music, and, I had to chuckle a little bit. I mean, hell no, dude. I don't want people to play music that sounds like I'm dying. I don't want people to treat me like I'm dying. As a matter of fact, you see this a lot in the real world, for example, among famous people. When people are dying of cancer, according to the personality type of quite a number of people, they don't go around telling people that. They don't want anybody to know. And it's not because they want to suffer in silence. It's not because it's a big secret. It's not because they're ashamed. It's just, damn it, they don't want everybody to treat them like they're dying and not know how to talk to them or deal with them because, my gosh, I'm so sorry you're dying, dude. Nobody wants to be bummed out for the rest of their life. I mean, Eddie Van Halen. We didn't really hear in the news for a long time that Eddie Van Halen was dying of cancer. It's one day we opened up the news and good grief, Eddie Van Halen had died. And I don't know much about Eddie Van Halen, but I know enough about his personality that it wouldn't have surprised me a bit that he would rather everybody not know he was dying of cancer except the people closest to him for the exact same reason I just specified.
Yep.
Nobody wants to be treated like they're dying. Nobody wants to bum out everybody else. I mean, there may be some hero ball being played there in terms of, oh, you know what, I just don't want everybody to feel sorry for me. But ultimately, it's like, I think I'd rather live for the rest of my life, not be dying for 6 months and have everybody remind me of it and talk in soft hushed tones and read psalms to me and play the freaking pan flute music when I have 6 months left to, well, actually live.
Yeah, Scott, it's not a run for your life thing. There was this was years back with Ben Gazzara. There was a show called TV show Run for Your Life. In each episode, there would be something that Ben would get into, would do something, interaction with people, something, maybe you could say something like heroic, right, that he would do that he wouldn't normally do because he knew he only had, I think in the storyline, it was a month to live, 2 months to live, whatever the hell it was. And, when you get in a situation like Gail was, or like anybody in Gail's situation, where you know that you're not going to live a long life, but you've got a choice that I've heard this statement, art is long, life is short. Art is long, life is short. And man, her life, especially the last stages of it, became her art. Is it the art of dying? I don't know if I could describe it as such, Scott, but I'll tell you what, that's what you remember in not so much the last day of a person's life, but maybe that last stage when, you were in that ninth inning or that fourth quarter. And like at the outset of our discussion here, that man, you put it all out there. You were gallant. And that's big, man. That's big.
I don't have a problem with the concept of the art of dying. I think that's kind of profound, frankly.
Mm.
You're mentioning TV shows. I'm actually unfamiliar with the TV show you were mentioning. The first thing I thought of was what happens if that show runs 4 or 5 seasons, right? When you have 30 days to live. And then, of course, that brought to mind something that should have come up at the very outset of this show when we were talking about the shootist and talking about Gran Torino. And this is also the Walter White story in Breaking Bad. He spent his whole life teaching a classroom full of kids chemistry, which isn't exactly unfulfilling, but he wanted to provide for his family. He wanted to make sure the people he left behind were left well accounted for, well taken care of. And he wanted to go out in a blaze of glory. It didn't matter. I mean, if he got killed, he was dying anyway. If he went to jail and died in jail, life sentence is what, a couple months? And I think one of the reasons why that show did so well, I mean, apart from the brilliant writing and acting, of course, was that it is so fascinating to us to consider a man going out in a blaze of glory, not by tapping into being some kind of Superman, fancy pants, Mr. Nice Guy, but by tapping into his dark side, And not that we would recommend guys aligning with a drug cartel as a way of going out in a blaze of glory.
Yeah.
But it just kind of demonstrates, illuminates, if you will, the variety of ways we can get up off our ass when we know we've got an expiration date and go do something exciting, finally. And Tim Ferriss and other guys talk about the deferred life plan, where, worker bees are looking forward to retirement when they get their gold watch, because then they can go on an adventure. Then they can go see the world. And that's just such a crappy way to look at life. Every day should be an adventure, and we really should live like we're dying every day. And my challenge to guys having listened to this show is, what are you going to do, fellas? Are you going to wait till you're on your deathbed? Are you at the very least going to wait until you're 65, 70 years old and retire? I mean, you got two cats, in a presidential election in the year 2020 who were in their mid to late 70s trying to go for arguably the most stressful, powerful position in the world. I mean, retirement in general is so, 1950. It's just something to think about, how I want to challenge these guys. I do want to quickly address 2 points because I'm curious about them and I want to get your opinion on them before we close. You mentioned guys working in unison, dying together, dying well. And a great example of that came to mind also brought to mind the idea that sometimes we don't get to choose when our time comes. Sometimes it's literally thrust upon us. You get guys in combat scenarios who obviously are there for each other and bands of brothers, and some of them don't come home. That's one thing. And of course, that's a very, very powerful example, I thought of United Flight 93 on 9/11 when they were hearing on their cell phones that something was going down on a national level. They weren't the only flight that got hijacked. And a band of guys got together and said, let's roll. And they took down the hijackers knowing, hey, look, this flight is doomed. They're going to fly our asses into something. So we may as well take them down before they can take everybody else down. And of course, they ended up making a movie about it. And those guys, in my opinion, died in the ultimate blaze of glory. For real, not just in a movie. But I have to come back to the fact that hardly any of us, realistically speaking, are going to be given an opportunity to be that heroic in our death. And I want to couple with that the idea that some guys, perhaps because of whatever demons are living in their mind and in their soul, try to craft that scenario for themselves. I'm thinking of all the rock stars who have offed themselves, committed suicide. Sid Vicious said somehow, I don't know firsthand whether he had hinted to someone before it happened, I want to be young enough when I die to look good in my casket.
Yeah.
And, you have the Kurt Cobains of the world who commit suicide. And in some twisted way, those guys think they're perhaps dying well. And indeed, some sort of heroism is bestowed upon them, right or wrong, because they were taken too soon, at the height of their popularity, or some would argue greatness.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't see that as dying well. I don't see killing myself as dying well. I don't think this is something we can manufacture for ourselves. A major part of the essence, as it were, of dying well successfully is indeed taking the hand that has been dealt to you by the higher power that created us and making the best of it. Not forcing that hand, but making the most of it. What would you say to that in closing to the show?
I think there's aid in dying, assisted dying, and you've pointed to it. The great Aldous Huxley, who was 68 when he died, had his wife inject LSD. A Brave New World author. He was a mystic and he saw the future, Huxley. He had his wife, he was injected with LSD and some said he died the perfect death because he was just on this wherever he was. Okay, that's Huxley. But for all of us here, Scott, all of us on the earth, we're men and women trying to figure this out. And when your number's called, John Doe, for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. What bell are you going to be ringing? How are you going to ring that bell? And I will say, irrespective of what your faith is and a higher power, God, whatever it is, there is a higher level of consciousness and a higher level you're going to go to. And I believe how you leave here prepares you for that next step. I know that's deep, but it prepares you for that next step on what you're going to do on that next level. And man, when I saw Gail, battling as she did and her warrior spirit, yet with a softness and a real depth to her, and be able to find that peace and dealing with the hand that you were dealt and making the best of it. That's almost like, man, maintaining hope. And then at some point you say, okay, I'm done. I'm at peace with this, and then it's time to transition. It's a beautiful thing to witness. It's a beautiful thing to be able to be a part of. It's inspiring. And yes, I was not the one who lost my life, but in that process, I now know what is possible and how to die well when my journey comes to an end. And I say that with all humility, Scott, because of Gail.
Powerful. We were musing before we started this show about basing the topic on a classic poem, right? Mm-hmm. By Alfred Lord Tennyson. And we ended up talking about John Donne instead, right?
Yeah.
And another sonnet of John Donne came to mind immediately. And that's Death Be Not Proud.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a widely misunderstood concept. Some people read that as it's not ever proud to die. All dying is shameful. But if you read the spiritual intent behind that poem, what John Donne is actually saying, if you go actually read the real poem instead of just the headline, go figure in the year 2020, right?
Yeah.
What he's doing is he's addressing death by name and telling death not to be proud because you haven't ended me. Mm-hmm. You will not triumph over me. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times when that concept comes into play in the imaginations of us mere mortals, we're thinking, our hope is in the hereafter. What an amazing, powerful thought to think that eternity started now. I'm not going to let death master me in the last 3-4 months of my temporal life. I'm going to go for it. And I mean, to me, that's a very exciting concept to end this show on. I do want to add something very briefly. I'm not going to be Pollyannish about the fact that plenty of folks nowadays, as we get older, die of Alzheimer's. And that steals your mental capacity from you over a period of time. And I'm sure it's crossed at least one smart guy or two's mind while they're listening to this. Yeah, guys, how the hell do I die proud? How the hell do I die well when I'm dying of Alzheimer's over a period of time? And yet, I think there's a way to do that admirably. I'm reminded of Ronald Reagan, who plenty of people claim to have spotted dementia in his demeanor during his second term. And of course, he was the oldest president we've had so far. After he was out of office and it was confirmed that he had Alzheimer's, he got on the radio and addressed the nation and said, here's my message to you of life, liberty, and frankly, my message to uplift you. Even as I know my time is short and my brain is going to leave me. While I still have a brain, I'm going to make good use of it, and here's my message to you. And I'm sure it's on audio somewhere. You can go listen to it. It was one hell of a powerful message from Ronnie.
Yeah, it was.
Republican, Democrat, or whatever, while his brain was working, he made it matter. And what I'll do for you guys is I'll try my darndest to find a link to that audio, and I'll put it in the show notes. Another guy who just now came to mind, and his name escapes me, but he was a college professor and he got a diagnosis of terminal cancer. And he went around speaking to crowds. I remember about living like you're dying and making the most of your life. And he called it the Last Lectures.
The Last Lecture. Randy, his last name started with a P. Randy Pausch.
Yes, that's the guy. That's the guy. Last Lectures. And I remember him demonstrating to audiences of, young and old, anybody would listen to him, but certainly at college campuses, that just because he knew he was dying doesn't mean he was dead yet.
Correct.
And he was doing push-ups in front of people as long as he could and just saying, hey, look, milk your life for all it's worth. And I know one of the things he was fond of saying is all of us are dying. I just have a bit of a clear idea of exactly when it's going to happen. And I'm going to put a link to his YouTube channel, okay, for the guys on here, because I think it's just powerful to watch someone in motion who's living this and making it happen. Yeah. That guy just came to mind. It's been years now. It's been probably over 10 years.
At least, I think so. Yeah.
And sure enough, he passed away.
He did,
just
Scott.
like he told us he would. He died of cancer ultimately. But what a great conversation. I've loved absolutely every second of this conversation. I've felt the chills of adrenaline run up my spine, quite a number of times during this particular episode. And I'm sure, and I genuinely hope and trust that other guys have felt similarly energized. For now, what I want to do is I want to point you guys to where you can get a copy of Larry Indiviglia's book on Amazon called 126 Days, 11 Minutes, Our Love Story. You already know this is a heartfelt guy with a lot to offer. And if you go to mountaintoppodcast.com/Larry, you'll be able to get your hands on this book. And you already see this coming. I'm going to put it at the top of the queue on my Amazon influencer page as well, gentlemen, at mountaintoppodcast.com/Amazon, where you can find not only Larry's book, but all the books from all the other authors, the illustrious guys and gals we've had on this show who are authors. All their books are there for you to take and add to your library as well. Larry Indiviglia, this show is going to go down as a classic. Enough said, man. Thank you so much for joining us today and dropping your wisdom.
Scott, you're very welcome. Really enjoyed it. And man, we could probably talk for another 2 hours on this topic over a beer or maybe 2 or 3. But man, thank you so much. I really, really got a lot out of it today. Yep.
Yeah, man. 100%. And listen, gentlemen, it's no coincidence that I have guests on like Larry Indiviglia who are high character guys. Larry, like I said, is a United States Naval Academy graduate. I work with Navy SEALs. I work with guys who are military officers on the regular. And it's because what we talk about around here is not bagging chicks. We talk about building relationships with women who are worthy of our respect and having those women love, cherish, and adore us in return. And that's why Origin Maine chose our show to sponsor. That's Jocko Willing's company. They have the best protein powder, the best supplements, and absolutely the best jeans and boots, among other things you have ever seen or worn in your entire life. And it's all made right here in the United States of America. Hero Soap, another veteran-owned company, bringing you the very best to make you smell like a man and be as clean as a whistle all the while. You know women love that. You can go to our website at mountaintoppodcast.com and visit our sponsors. When you do, please use Mountain10 as the coupon code to get an additional 10% off. And while you're there, gentlemen, hey, all of us do have an expiration date. Life is short, but life is also long too. You can accomplish your dreams. You can establish purpose, have flaming ambition like that lion in the wild with the fire in his eyes, and absolutely positively you can attract the kind of woman you actually want for a change, the woman of your dreams. Let's talk about it, gentlemen. More and more of you guys have been calling me, getting on my schedule to talk for free for 25 minutes, and I want to talk to you next. Get on my schedule. Let's talk for 25 minutes about your future and how to make it happen on your terms and with your goals and your values in mind. Sign up at mountaintoppodcast.com and let's get after it, guys. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.